In the heart of the dense, fog-laden forest of Ashen Hollow, a forgotten village lay in ruin. The locals called it Cursed, a place where the air itself was tainted with whispers of the dead. Only the truly desperate or foolish dared to enter its haunted boundaries. On a dare, 5 friends, Julia, Michael, Claire, Ryan, and Peter, decided to explore the village, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. As they crossed into Ashen Hollow, the air grew heavy, thick with the stench of decay. The trees loomed like skeletal hands reaching out from the ground, their twisted branches scratching against the sky. They found a crumbling church at the village's center, its stained glass windows shattered, and its bell tower leaning as if ready to collapse. A sense of dread settled over them, tightening like a noose. Inside, they discovered an altar covered in dried blood, with strange symbols carved into the stone. Julia, curious and bold, touched the carvings, and the church shuddered as if alive. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The sound of chanting filled the air, growing louder and more oppressive with each passing second. Shadows danced along the walls, forming ghastly figures with hollow eyes and gaping mouths. Without warning, Peter was yanked into the darkness by an unseen force. His screams echoed through the church as the others watched in helpless terror. They saw his body being torn apart by invisible hands, blood spraying across the room in a sickening display of cruelty. His lifeless, mutilated corpse was thrown back at their feet, eyes frozen in an expression of sheer agony. Panic set in as the friends realized there was no escape. Michael tried to break the windows, but they remained solid, as if reinforced by some malevolent force. The chanting grew louder, now accompanied by a low, guttural growl that reverberated through their bones. From the shadows, grotesque, half-formed creatures emerged, their flesh dripping and eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. Ryan, shaking with fear, attempted to fight them off, but his efforts were in vain. The creatures overwhelmed him, dragging him to the ground. He struggled and screamed as they feasted on his flesh, their sharp teeth tearing through his skin. The others could only watch in horror as his cries faded into a wet, choking gurgle. The creatures left nothing but a pool of blood and mangled bones in their wake. Julia, Claire, and Michael huddled together, their minds fraying at the edges as the horrors continued to unfold. The chanting reached a fever pitch, and the air around them crackled with dark energy. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, with hollow eyes and a face twisted in a grotesque smile. It was the priest of the church, long dead, but now something far worse than a mere ghost. His presence exuded pure malice, a tangible force that weighed on their chests, suffocating them.
"You should not have come here," the priest intoned, his voice a raspy whisper that echoed with centuries of pain and rage. "You have trespassed on sacred ground. Now you will pay the price." Claire, overcome with terror, made a desperate dash for the altar, hoping to destroy whatever dark power held them captive. But as she reached it, the priest raised a hand, and she was lifted into the air by an invisible force. Her body contorted in unnatural ways, bones snapping and flesh tearing as the priest twisted her like a rag doll. With a sickening crack, her spine shattered, and she fell to the floor, dead before she hit the ground. Julia and Michael were paralyzed with fear, tears streaming down their faces. The priest's gaze fell on them, and he began to chant in a language that no human should ever speak. The walls of the church began to close in, the ceiling lowering as if the building itself sought to crush them. Michael, in a final act of desperation, grabbed a piece of broken glass and slashed at his own throat, preferring to die by his own hand than suffer the fate of his friends. Blood sprayed from the wound, and he collapsed in a heap, the light fading from his eyes. Julia, now the last one standing, felt her sanity slipping away. The priest approached her, his hollow eyes boring into her soul. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her mind was assaulted by visions of the horrors that had befallen her friends, replayed over and over until she could no longer distinguish reality from nightmare. The priest reached out and touched her forehead, and she felt her consciousness being ripped from her body. The last thing Julia saw was her own lifeless body collapsing to the floor, her soul dragged into the abyss by the priest. The church fell silent once more, the shadows retreating, satisfied with their feast. The Curse of Ashen Hollow claimed another set of victims, and the village waited patiently for the next to come. As the sun set, the village stood silent and still, a monument to the cruelty and horror that lurked within. Those who ventured into Ashen Hollow were never seen again, their souls forever trapped in the cursed village, feeding the darkness that thrived on fear and despair.